After close to a year-long hold, America is back to having mass shootings far too regularly. And we now have President Biden, who has talked about doing something about this, some form of gun control in a country that seems to want something to finally be done. There hasn't been much yet, though. So let's talk about what Joe Biden has done and what might be coming in the near future, hopefully. And we're very lucky to be joined in the program to talk about this topic and more. Once again, by the director of the Department of Medicine, Health and Society at Vanderbilt University, as well as a professor of sociology and psychiatry there, and the author of Dying of Whiteness, Jonathan Metzl. Welcome back to the Damage Report.
Thanks so much. Great to be back.
Glad to have you here. So a couple different things that we want to talk about. The first is what Biden has done so far. And so he has signed an executive order having to do with guns, focused mainly, it seems like, on research and future stuff that might be done. What do you think about that executive order?
We have 40,000 gun deaths a year in this country. I think anything is going to be an improvement. I think Biden made some important first steps. Some were about addressing the trafficking of guns, and so ghost guns, guns you can make yourself, 3D guns, you name it, those kind of guns. We don't want any of those guns because they're not traceable. So that was important. I certainly think more money for gun violence prevention in communities is an important step. None of this is going to change the gun problem we have in this country. It's an important step and it's an important signal. But I don't think in and of itself it's going to make a difference if it's not accompanied by a bunch of other stuff.
I certainly agree. But what we have right now is some research, and that's something that you've written about in the past about what the future of gun-focused research should actually look like. I don't necessarily know exactly what form it will come in, but based on your research, what are some suggestions you would have for what they should do as they're increasing the amount of research in the future?
Well, I think one of the issues, of course, is that there's been this divide almost between the gun research we do about like mass shootings, for example, that happen in high profile places, and just the everyday drone of gun related injury and death that happens in communities of color. And so what we had before was mass shootings are when it makes the news, but if it happens in South Chicago, we call it gang violence or urban crime, something like that. And so part of the work I've been doing recently, we just put out an article last week about this, is to say, let's look at all multiple victim shootings the same in terms of thinking about what might stop them. And let's think about really the broad spectrum of gun crime and gun death. Of course, we also have an issue about the more guns, the more suicides. 2/3 of gun death in this country are suicide. And so also look a bit more closely at suicide. And for me, it's also that, we just need broader coalitions looking at this. I mean, the question of gun rights isn't just about gun control versus gun rights. It's a broader issue. It ties into social justice. It ties into police reform. Police are going to be much more likely to draw their weapons if they feel like they're going into a place where there are weapons, for example. Police and victims get shot more where there are guns and stuff. So a lot of these things are happening at the same time. And the research we've been doing recently, and we just had a paper come out in Social Science and Medicine, said, let's broaden our idea about what we're looking at here to come up with some broader solutions.
It's interesting that there's been seemingly for a long time, there's been this real, maybe hesitance doesn't go nearly far enough to have the government be involved in research into this, even insofar as like really getting into why it's happening. And I can sort of understand why some parties would not want there to be a great deal of research into that. What I find interesting is that you and your co-authors in the paper that we referenced earlier, you say that current gun owners, people who sell guns, those who might consider themselves to be on the opposite side in a lot of ways of this issue, you believe that they should actually be brought in. What are some potential areas where you feel like there could be some common ground with those people who might have pretty hardened views of what gun control might look like, what it might accomplish, they might be pretty opposed to it?
Yeah, I think there are two important avenues here. One, of course, is what do guns mean to people? I think that a lot of times researchers swoop in and they say, we need background checks or we need, whatever. They're looking at guns that are fired. They're looking at guns in the instances where there's this horrible thing happen. And that makes sense, right? The public health model is like, here's a vector, let's stop the vector and keep people safe. But we have millions of guns in this country, over 1 gun per person. And so most guns are never fired. And so part of the issue that we argue is let's have conversations about guns at times when they're not being fired. Let's talk to gun owners and figure out what guns mean in people's daily lives. So that's certainly part of it. Another really big part of it is, what are the vectors that divide people about this? I mean, it's important to remember nobody wants gun death. Nobody wants gun crime. Nobody wants gun suicide. But there are massive industries that go into dividing people, to make people think that they have nothing in common with each other. And so it's also, how can you disrupt this? I mean, for me, as somebody who studied this for a long time, even this pro-gun, anti-gun, the whole divide is like it just, it's so counterproductive, but there are people driving that narrative and making money off of it. And one example, for example, is mass shootings, right? Mass shootings are horrible, they're horrific, nobody wants them. And they're also great for business because they're great gun selling opportunities, because then the minute it happens, somebody's out there saying, well, somebody's going to take away your guns, and everybody rushes out and buys a gun. So disrupting that narrative, to me, is super important. It's not just about the shooting itself. It's also about, how can we address this as a site of disinformation and find some common cause.
Yeah, there is a very clear profit motive, and the calls to action to purchase a product it's just about the clearest that we see in American politics. Virtually anything that happens that has to do with guns is a reason to go out and buy more guns and ammunition. That is certainly the case.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.